Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest rendition of Tales from Outer Space. Taken from the subreddit HFY. All the relevant links will be down below. And as always, I hope that you enjoy, and if you do, please consider supporting the channel. Now, on to the science fiction. Sthiss Pride, written by TheAusNerd. Rowdy shouts of encouragement and trash talk blared from within the training room just down the hall, giving those eating in the mess hall a loud, if not unpleasant background track to listen to. Sentries came in, still armored from their recent patrols and hungry for a meal. A maintenance crew debated the best way to fix a particularly uncooperative plumbing line. Others simply chatted amongst themselves in their off hours. But everyone on the ship knew to stick to their species. This prevailing wisdom left the two Sthiss in the mess hall to eat in relative peace, their long, scaly bodies curled onto the benches, barely able to support their immense weight. "I can't wait to be back into the jungle," said Sthiss longingly, the lingering earthly flavor of the locally sourced lacquer rat on his tongue. "It's just, the bush you're in, the poor little turkey-ox that crosses your path. You wait for it to stop for just a moment, and bam! You're eating like a clutch, father." He whipped his arm forward to simulate the motion, cheek frills glowing with aggressive orange light. "I know how you feel, but you signed up for this, and now you have to commit," Kaskoth explained calmly as he diced his lacquer into smaller chunks for easier digestion. But his squadmate across the table went on, enraptured by recalling his past hunts. "The way their bones snap as they go down is just so satisfying. And you get that warm feeling when the hooves start digesting. Oh, it's wonderful, but no." In an instant, Soluthian's expression changed. His frills switched from an ecstatic lime green to a more somber, almost angry burgundy. "There would have been no problems with me going out to hunt, but we had to be stuck here in a human base." His final outburst drew some eyes from the human personnel, but the crew was used to it at this point. Kaskoth laid his utensils down. "Sola, you know why we're here?" "Yes, I do. We're all members of this alliance, and we need to preserve unity by defending freedom side by side, even in these peaceful times." He waved his tail mockingly as he spoke. "Toss it on a pike. We could do that ourselves, but the High Father had us team up with these tiny things." The Soluthian gestured to the passing technician, who returned a piercing glare. "We can snap them in half. What can they do?" Kaskoth firmly planted his hands on the table. His frills glowed an ominous blue. "If you had any self-awareness, you would realize that it's exactly this kind of arrogance that makes us allying with humans a good idea." "Arrogance? It's not arrogance if you can back it up. I'm telling you, I can mop the floor with any human on the ship." Kaskoth's eyes narrowed. Soluthian was right about Sthiss being physically superior to humans in most every way. With strength and speed that the average outclassed anything humans could deliver, weight that made them all but immovable, eyesight that made the dark a non-issue, and paralyzing venom as a tool that made them the apex predators back on Aloths. No human could ever measure up to an adult Sthiss, let alone one trained for combat like Soluthian. He thought back to the training, looking for weaknesses he knew was there, something to check his squadmate's ego, but he found nothing. He relaxed his posture, knowing that he wouldn't convince anyone without solid arguing points, let alone one as self-important as Soluthian. The din from down the hall subsided, and a group of human soldiers flooded the mess hall, sore from their training. Soluthian looked at the passing humans with scrutiny, scoffing at their claims of discomfort and grunts of pain as they shuffled towards the food line. Their instructor walked in behind them, talking to the soldier beside her. "Left leg open, you're too easy to trip up. Find that quick or you're dead the instant you're close in combat." She dismissed the soldier, who quickly joined the squad mates in line. She looked at her trainees with a mix of pride and concern. "Her," said Silithian, a flash of orange at his throat. "Sergeant Hale, what about her?" Kaskoth had an inkling as to the nature of Silithian's question, but needed confirmation. "She's tough for a human, yeah. She's a close combat instructor. She has to be. As little as he wanted Silithian to go through with it, he would never have gotten away with just lying about that. All right then." With those words, Silithian dropped from the bench and slithered on his belly over towards the human woman, his cheeks pulsing orange. Kaskoth went to go after him, but felt a hand press on his stomach before he could lift himself from the bench. A human, the same that Silithian had pointed to earlier as an example of weakness. He sternly looked Kaskoth in the eyes. "Let him. I want to see this." Kaskoth watched as his squadmate closed in on Hale and considered stopping him, but stayed where he was, both to satisfy his curiosity and because Hale had noticed the Sthiss approaching. Silithian curled his tail behind him and saluted his superior. "Madam Sergeant, may I ask you something?" Hale turned to the reptile. The lack of urgency or tension in her posture or speech didn't stop her from exuding authority. "At ease, you may. I believe my close combat skills are beginning to wane. May I trouble you for some one-on-one training?" The Silithian suppressed any ill will in his voice that he could have betrayed. A moment passed and Hale silently studied Silithian. "All right, go on then." "Thank you, sir." The orange that flushed on Silithian's cheeks increased in luminance as the frills waved with delighted anticipation. Silithians had seen humans fight before, their tiny appendages weakly colliding with their soft bodies over and over again for minutes at a time. It was exhausting. This fought with quick, powerful strikes, quick and powerful enough that most duels between Sthiss ended with 1 or 2 blows. The fight was over before it began. The pair exited the mess hall, closely followed by Kaskoth and the human technician, and made their way down the corridor and to the nearby training room. Turning into the room, machinery of all types lined the walls, facilitating any possible exercise one may ever need. The center of the room was empty, save for a few thin floor mats. Hale led Silithian and the chamber's center before turning to the Sthiss, her eyes stern as she looks up at the reptile. "I know what that color in your cheeks means." Silithian was taken aback slightly, but he couldn't complain. He now had to put no effort in keeping up appearances, and let his demeanor show his inner thoughts. "So, let's do it. First, give in or get knocked out losers. No lethal strikes. So that means no venom, and nothing that can permanently injure." Silithian accepted the rules along those lines, but was disappointed nonetheless. Still, he acquiesced with a nod, and took a ready position, crouching low to match his prey's height, arms bent at his sides, ready to lunge. His time with an Aloths came back to him, all those times he sat patiently in the shrubbery, waiting for his right moment to strike. This was no different. Hale looked around, spying Kaskoth. "You there! Come here a moment," said Hale, pointing her finger at Kaskoth, who complied with his superior's request. "You will referee this match. Are you aware of the rules I stipulated?" "Yes, sir." Kaskoth's heart began beating faster, knowing the likely outcome would land Silithian and likely himself in hot water with the local warrant officer. He was not, however, going to disobey an order now, and took position away from the 2 combatants. Hale spread her feet, crouching slightly, instinctually raising her hands to intercept attacks to the head. She looked at the reptile, taking in his stance and probable angles of attack. Her eyes locked with Silithian's, and all doubt of whether this fight was going to happen was washed away. "Are the combatants ready?" said Kaskoth, throwing a nervous glance at the stern-faced technician to his side. "Yes," replied the pair in unison, not daring to break their gaze. Kaskoth raised his arm and counted down. 3, 2, 1. Kaskoth swings his arms down. "Begin!" In an instant, Silithian lunges forward, using his strong tail as a spring to launch himself at speeds that would catch most humans, and even Sthiss, off guard. Salathian makes a conscious effort to keep his mouth closed so as to not bite Hale, fighting every instinct he had honed back on Aloth's, and instead shoots his arms forward to grab the human before she has a chance to escape. Hale, however, had done her research. She knows there is no way that she could take a Sthiss in a straight fight, and focuses her mind on evasion. She leaps up and over the Sthiss' arms and lands on his back as his momentum carries him far past Hale's starting position. Salathian responds by violently undulating his body, throwing Hale off balance and leaving him the opportunity to twist his upper half around and lunge again. He finds it oddly taxing, but no big deal. Without a moment to hesitate, Hale drops to her body down, lying prone on the reptile's body as his lunge passes her overhead. Before Salathian could use his new position to constrict Hale, she pushes herself off of Sthiss onto the floor, silently thanking his subtly rough scales for giving her the grip needed to efficiently shove herself aside. Salathian slams the perpendicular lengths of his body together in an endeavor to trap Hale, but finds that she is elsewhere. He whips his head around, looking for his prey. His eyes sweep past Kaskoth, picking up a blur of aqua green emanating from his cheeks, a sign of concentration. He brushes his squad mate's mental process aside and focuses once more on the hunt Hale calls a fight. Hale takes the moment her opponent's eyes are off of her to leap towards the reptile, her eyes on its neck. Nothing can resist a chokehold for long, and with the rules she set in place, Salathians wouldn't dare to slam her against the ground for fear of permanently injuring her. The instant Hale's fingers grip around the scales and the Sthiss' back, however, Salathian feels the brush of the human skin and wrenches himself away, leaving Hale unbalanced. Transferring the momentum down his body with a great effort, Salathian swings his body towards the human and sends the tip of his tail into her sternum just as she regains her balance. Hale is sent sprawling, her eyes scrunching against agony. Pain radiates out from her chest as Sthiss' attack reveals just how outclassed the two are in terms of physical strength. Her head hits the floor, bringing her back to reality. Her eyes shoot open, landing on Kaskoth, his cheeks burning with a chartreuse glow, indicating epiphany of her prior research was anything to go by. Hale rapidly shifts her gaze back to Salathian and sees the Sthiss taking a large breath in anticipation. She painfully scrambles to her feet in time to dive out of the way of another lunge from Salathian, barely missing her feet. Salathian stops himself by planting his hands on the floor and brings his tail around to intercept Hale, who seems to be moving even faster than before he landed the first blow. She deftly sidesteps to avoid the second collision. Every fiber of Hale's body is telling her to stop, with a burning pain punctuating every breath and footstep. But this doesn't stop Hale, who clambers over Salathian's body and pulls himself tighter into an attempt to encircle her. Salathian goes high, bringing himself up and over the coiled body to bring himself down upon Hale. What's more, Salathian's prey moves faster than they initially appeared to be and springs away from his diving lunge and out of his sight. Salathian stops his momentum an inch from the floor and rapidly unfurls himself, intending to sweep Hale out into the open for an easy strike. He breathes heavily, believing this to be a good workout, if nothing less. Pain continues in its attempt to get Hale to concede, but the sergeant, stubborn as ever, refuses to let an arrogant, overgrown snake best her. She once more surmounts the reptile's body, happy that his movements are starting to slow down to a pace that she can match. There, still recovering from a climb over his midsection, undoubtedly racked in pain from his successful strike, and with most of her escape routes cut off by his tail. Perfect. His instincts kick in, lunging his head forward to seize its prey. Time seems to slow as he approaches, adrenaline enhancing his senses so as to take every detail of his victory. And still his prey moves. There, exhausted from the fight that has lasted longer than most Sthiss would ever experience, chasing prey far more resilient and observant than that of the typical Sthiss hunts. Salathian's lunge is slow and lacking in finesse for his first pounce. Perfect. Hale leaps to the side, planting a boot in Salathian's midsection as his head comes down and jumps off the reptile's body, landing on Slithin's upper back. The instant she touches down, Hale flattens herself upon the reptile's back, and in a moment her feet lock her legs around the Sthiss' torso and her arms lock around Slithin's neck. Slithin thrashes with all his strength, and still time is slowed, stretched for a moment of humiliation out far beyond reason. Still, his prey hangs on, tightening their grip around his throat and further draining him of stamina. He stands to lose not only the match, but his pride, and that is something he would not abide. Rules be damned, Slithin leans forward and with a concerted effort throws himself backwards. Hale disengages her legs and kicks away from Slithin as the height of his arc, and watches as the Sthiss' body slams into the floor with a deafening crash. Hale lands immediately after, with the impact sending shockwaves up her body, exacerbating her pain. Despite the reptile's best effort, Hale's arms remained locked around his neck. Slithin had no strength left. He thrashes, but the human holds firm. He swings his fists at Hale, but none land with the impact typical of Sthiss punches. Every movement he makes strains his stamina further increasing the effectiveness of the human's chokehold. His lifetime of hurts, his years of training, his pride, all useless to this tiny human. He yells, for he has to force the words out, "I give." The infirmary was quiet, for Hale needed her rest. Slithin slowly made his way through the ward, rows and beds and equipment sliding out of view as the Sthiss closed in Hale's bed. The sergeant laid on the angled bed at the end of the infirmary, eyes closed, an intravenous drip providing her with calcium glucose solution she needed to expedite her recovery sticking out from her arm. The notice at the end of the bed told Slithin that the payload of nanobots had been injected into her sternum and that she was expected to fully recover by the end of the week. "Madam Sergeant," said Slithin, saluting in earnest. Hale slowly roused herself from her rest and opened her eyes to see the reptile. She didn't realize the agreed-upon time had come already. "At ease," she said as she reached over to the control panel on the side of her bed, adjusting the bed's angle so she could better speak to him. "So, what's this about?" Slithin's posture became rigid, disciplined. "Madam Sergeant, I apologize for breaking your ribs and attempting to break the rules of our engagement with intent to crush you beneath my weight." Hale took a breath, labored by her splintered ribs, as she tore her eyes away from the ward's entrance. "You have not disobeyed orders by strike me. I expect you to do as much when I permitted the match. You did, however, attempt to permanently injure me, and thereby disobey a direct order. I'll have to report this to the WO. Expected emotion." "Yes, ma'am." Slithin expected as much when he finally came to his senses following the match. This was not the only reason for his visit, though, as he continued. "But, I must ask a question, Madam Sergeant." "Ask away." "How did you do it? By all rights, I should have won our match, even with the rules you put in place." With every movement he had spare in the short spans between punitive janitorial work, that was the sole question on his mind. How did the human defeat a trained Sthiss soldier? An unmistakable sound of scales and steel sounded from across the infirmary, and a ghost of a smile appeared on Hale's lips. He couldn't have worked out more perfectly. "I think your friend can tell you that." Salathian looked at the entrance to the infirmary to see Kassoth slithering towards the pair. Upon reaching the bed, Kassoth saluted. "You called for me, Madam Sergeant." "Yes, you noticed something during our match, something your squad mate would like to know." Hale's eyes returned to Slithin, an indulgent smugness in her expression. "Yes, Madam Sergeant." Kassoth turned to Slithin, his epiphany fresh in his mind. "Solar, back on the Loths, what were we trained for?" Slithin's time on his home planet had never left his memory, and so the answer came to him naturally. "Hunting and fighting." "Yes. Now, how were we trained to hunt?" Slithin had performed the process so many times he could recall the exact technique involved in curling up behind a bush by memory, and so the answer came to him naturally. "Ambushing our prey and taking them out with a single blow." The sole weakness Kassoth racked his brain to find was put in full display during the match. Now he had only to expose it. "Exactly. We're ambush predators. We're not built for sustained combat. We don't have the stamina for it. Silithian's lifetime of training, hunting, and reinforcing the idea that Siths were great predators in the galaxy had already been shaken by his defeat, his humiliation. But it was this moment where the simplicity of his faults and their exploitation was laid bare, that the self-built facade was shattered. His posture slouched as he allowed himself to take in the reality, where suddenly everything felt off, unnatural. Kassath laid a hand on his shoulder, allowing him to feel somewhat grounded in the reality he knew. This just keeps happening. Some hotshot race comes onto the scene thinking they're perfect because they're the top dog on the spec that they call home. So when they see that they're as tiny as the rest of us, they can't accept it, said Hale, satisfied that much-needed lesson had been learned despite the injury it took to teach it. Silithian steadied his nerves. Defeated or no, he wouldn't be outdone by a few words. Taking a large breath, he looked at the sergeant in the eyes. Thank you for your wisdom. I should return to my assignment. And with those words, he left to do his duty. As he took hold of the janitorial cart outside the infirmary, he nodded respectfully at the passing technician. Kassath turned to Hale. Thanks for this. He's good at what he does. He's just not the brightest. Hale chuckled painfully. To be fair, I wasn't being all that smart either. How so? Kassath asked, perplexed. Hale placed a hand on her sternum. The smart thing to do is not fight a Sthiss in the first place. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.